They moved into the same apartment building the same month. Same floor, same square footage, same rent. Two women, both in their early 30s, both earning decent salaries, both at that stage of life where things were supposed to be coming together. Within 6 months, you could tell them apart without knowing anything about their bank accounts. The first woman had her apartment staged like a showroom, furniture from the expensive end of every catalog, a coffee machine that cost more than some people's monthly grocery bill, clothes that rotated in and out with the seasons. Her social media looked like a lifestyle brand. Brunches, rooftop bars, weekend trips. Always the right table, always the right outfit, always the right image. She looked, by every external measure, like someone who had figured it out. The second woman's apartment was comfortable but quiet. Nothing remarkable. A decent sofa she'd had for years, a coffee machine that made good coffee without announcing itself. She went out, but not constantly. She traveled, but not for the photo. From the outside, she looked ordinary, unremarkable, like someone still working toward the life she wanted. 3 years later, the first woman was struggling in a way nobody around her knew. The credit card balance had grown every month for 2 years. The beautiful apartment felt like a trap she couldn't afford to leave. She was one unexpected expense away from a situation she didn't want to think about. She was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with how hard she was working, and everything to do with the cost of maintaining a life that looked the way it looked. The second woman had just put a deposit on a property. She had an investment account that had been growing quietly for 3 years. She had no debt. She had options, real ones, and she had built them almost invisibly, in plain sight, while everyone around her was busy looking at the first woman. Same building, same rent, same starting point. Completely different financial realities. And the only thing that separated them was a lifestyle choice that most people never examine closely enough to understand what it actually costs. This isn't about frugality. It isn't about giving up the things you enjoy or pretending that money doesn't matter or living like a monk to retire at 40. It's about a specific modern trap, a way of spending money that is so normalized, so culturally encouraged, so deeply woven into how we define success that most people step into it without ever making a conscious decision to do so. The fake rich lifestyle is not a personality flaw. It is a system designed, quite deliberately, to take money from people who are trying to look like they have it and transfer it to people who actually do. And until you understand how that system works, the mechanics of it, the psychology of it, the real numbers behind it, you will keep funding it without realizing you are the product, not the participant. I'm going to show you exactly how the fake rich lifestyle works, why it is so difficult to escape, what it is actually costing you in numbers you can calculate, and what the shift looks like when someone finally decides to stop performing wealth and start building it. This is not a lecture about spending less. It is an explanation of a system most people have never been described to them clearly, and once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it. The content. The fake rich lifestyle has one defining characteristic. Every financial decision is made for an external audience, not for your future, not for your security, not even, if you're honest, entirely for your own enjoyment, for the perception of other people, for the image that gets constructed in the minds of colleagues, followers, acquaintances, and strangers who will glance at your life for approximately 3 seconds before moving on to the next thing. This is the foundation of the entire trap. When your financial decisions are driven by how they will be perceived rather than what they will produce, you will consistently make choices that look good and function badly. The car that signals arrival, the apartment in the neighborhood that signals status, the restaurant that signals taste, the wardrobe that signals success. Each one individually feels like a reasonable expression of who you are. Together, they form a financial structure that is consuming your future in exchange for someone else's approval. And here is the part that makes this genuinely painful to examine. The approval you are purchasing is not even reliable. It's temporary, conditional, and almost entirely indifferent to your actual well-being. The people whose opinion you are spending money to influence are mostly not thinking about you. They're busy managing their own performance, their own image, their own quiet financial anxiety. The audience you are performing for is largely not watching, and the ones who are watching will forget by tomorrow. But the debt is still there on Monday morning. Here is how the fake rich lifestyle actually functions as a financial system, and why it is so effective at keeping people exactly where they are. It works through what I'll call the visibility trap. Human beings are deeply wired to use visible signals to assess status, success, and belonging. This is not a modern invention. It is ancient. For most of human history, visible signals of resources, clothing, shelter, food, genuinely correlated with actual resources. If someone looked wealthy, they probably were. The signal and the reality were connected. That connection has been severed completely. Today, the visible signals of wealth are available on credit to almost anyone. The car that would have once indicated genuine affluence can be leased for a monthly payment that fits inside a modest budget. The designer clothing that once indicated real discretionary income can be put on a credit card and paid off over 18 months. The restaurant, the holiday, the renovated apartment, all of it is available right now to people who cannot actually afford any of it on terms that will cost them far more than the sticker price. The result is a world where visible signals of wealth have almost completely decoupled from actual wealth, where the people who look the most successful are very often the most financially fragile, and where the genuinely financially stable are invisible because they stopped spending money on signals a long time ago. But here's what most people miss. Because everyone can now access the appearance of wealth on credit, the pressure to do so has intensified enormously. When your entire social environment is performing financial success, when the people around you, the feeds you scroll through, the culture you exist in is saturated with signals of affluence, the psychological pressure to match it is constant, relentless, and almost impossible to consciously resist without understanding exactly what is driving it. Let's talk about the real numbers, because this is where the fake rich lifestyle stops being a philosophical problem and becomes a calculable catastrophe. The average person living a fake rich lifestyle is not making one large dramatic financial mistake. They are making dozens of small ones, each individually defensible, collectively ruinous. Consider a realistic profile, a woman earning $60,000 a year. She leases a car that costs her $550 a month, more than she would spend on a reliable used car she owned outright. She lives in an apartment that costs $300 a month more than a comparable one in a slightly less impressive postcode. She spends an extra $200 a month on clothing she buys partly for how it reads to other people. She eats out at restaurants that cost on average, $150 a month more than she would spend if she was choosing purely for the food rather than the experience and image. None of these numbers are dramatic. Each one feels manageable. Together, they represent $1,200 a month, $14,400 a year going directly into the performance of a lifestyle rather than the building of a financial future. It gets worse. Over 10 years, that's $144,000 spent on appearances. But that is not the real cost. The real cost is what that money would have become. $144,000 invested consistently over 10 years at a modest return does not stay at $144,000. It grows substantially. We are talking about a difference over a career that can reach several $100,000 from one woman's choice to stop performing and start building. That is the number nobody puts on the fake rich lifestyle, not what it costs you in the future you never built. The onerous engine behind all of this is something worth understanding in detail because knowing about it is not the same as being immune to it. There's a concept in behavioral economics called relative deprivation. It describes the experience of feeling poor, not in absolute terms, not because you lack food or shelter, but relative to the people you are comparing yourself to. And relative deprivation produces the same psychological response as actual material scarcity.
It creates anxiety, it creates urgency, it creates the powerful, irrational drive to close the perceived gap, even when closing that gap requires spending money you don't have on things you don't need. The fake rich lifestyle is in large part a response to chronic relative deprivation, not real poverty, perceived inadequacy relative to a reference group that has been artificially inflated by social media, advertising, and a culture that has weaponized aspiration into a purchasing decision. You scroll past 100 images of people living at a level above yours. Your brain processes this not as entertainment, but as social data. It registers a gap, and then it begins generating pressure to close that gap through spending, through signaling, through the acquisition of the visible markers that appear to separate you from the life you feel you should have. This is not weakness, this is neuroscience, but understanding it gives you something important.
Not a reflection of your actual values, a manufactured response to a manufactured comparison, designed specifically to result in a purchasing decision. The moment you can name it, you have a choice. Before you can name it, you just have the debt. There is a specific moment when the fake rich lifestyle reveals itself most clearly, and it is the moment of financial stress. When the unexpected expense arrives, and it always does, the person living a fake rich lifestyle is exposed in the most private, most anxious way possible. The beautiful life on the surface, the complete absence of buffer underneath. This is the moment when the car payment that projected success becomes the reason there is nothing left for the emergency. The apartment in the impressive postcode becomes the reason there is no flexibility when the job disappears. The wardrobe, the restaurants, the leases, the credit card balances. In the moment of genuine financial need, all of it transforms from a lifestyle into a trap. And the cruelest part of this moment is the silence around it, because the fake rich lifestyle requires its practitioners to maintain the performance even while the financial reality underneath it is deteriorating. You cannot let the image slip. The image is the whole project, so the anxiety stays private, the stress stays hidden, the gap between the performance and the reality grows wider and more exhausting to maintain. I'm not done yet, because there is a dimension to this that goes beyond money and touches something more fundamental about how people live. The fake rich lifestyle is not just financially expensive, it is psychologically expensive. It requires constant maintenance, constant attention to how things look, constant management of the gap between reality and performance. This is not a passive cost, it is active, ongoing work, the work of keeping up an image, and it consumes cognitive and emotional resources that could be going towards something else entirely. The woman building actual wealth has redirected that energy. She's not managing an image, she is building a reality. And the psychological freedom that comes with that, the absence of the performance, the absence of the gap to maintain, is not a small thing. It is, for many people who have made the transition, the most underestimated benefit of the whole shift. The exit from the fake rich lifestyle is not dramatic. It does not require a complete overhaul of your personality or a sudden conversion to a different set of values. It requires one shift in the question you ask before spending money. Most people making a financial decision ask one of two questions. Can I afford this? Or does this look like what I'm supposed to have at this stage of my life? The first question is about cash flow. The second question is about image, and it is the second question that does the damage. The shift is to a third question. Does this serve the financial life I am actually trying to build? That question reorients everything. It is not about deprivation. It is about intention. A holiday can pass that question if it is something you genuinely value and can genuinely afford, not a performance for social media that you're putting on credit. A car can pass that question if it reliably gets you where you need to go without consuming a disproportionate share of your income.
A meal at a good restaurant can pass that question if it is a genuine pleasure rather than a signal to people at adjacent tables. The fake rich lifestyle fails that question almost entirely because when you strip away the audience, when you remove the social performance and ask what you are actually getting for the money, the answer is almost always less than you paid for. Here is what the other side of this looks like in practice and why it is so much quieter than the lifestyle it replaces. The woman who stops funding the fake rich lifestyle and starts building actual wealth does not look different from the outside at first. Her car is still practical, her apartment is still modest, her clothes are still reasonable. From the outside, she looks exactly like someone who hasn't made it yet. But underneath that ordinary exterior, something is compounding. An investment account is growing, a property is accumulating equity, an emergency fund is providing the kind of security that means no single event can derail everything. Options are accumulating. Real ones, the kind that let you say no to a job you hate, yes to an opportunity you love, or simply do nothing for a while without financial catastrophe. This is what real wealth looks like in the years before it becomes visible. It looks like nothing. It looks like the woman eating lunch at home while someone else is performing at the restaurant. It looks ordinary right up until the moment it becomes extraordinary. And by then, the performance is long over, and the people who are watching have moved on. The financially free woman doesn't need to announce her arrival. She already knows she's there. Remember the two women from the beginning. Same building, same floor, same rent. 3 years later, two completely different financial realities. Here's what actually happened between them. The first woman was not careless with money in the way people usually mean. She was deliberate. She was intentional. She made choices constantly about how her life looked, about what image she was projecting, about what the details of her existence communicated to the people around her. She worked hard at it. She was good at it. She built a life that looked from every external angle exactly like success. But she built it for an audience, and the audience was never going to pay her back. Every dollar that went into the performance was a dollar that never compounded. Every month that the credit card balance grew was a month that the investment account didn't. The beautiful surface of her financial life was consuming its foundation, and by the time the gap became impossible to ignore, it had been growing quietly for years. The second woman made a different choice. Not a louder one, not a more dramatic one. She simply decided that the version of success worth building was the one that worked from the inside rather than looked good from the outside. She stopped asking what her money said about her and started asking what it was doing for her. She redirected the performance budget into the building budget month by month without announcing it, without making it a statement, without performing the decision itself. 3 years later, she had a deposit on a property, an investment account, and no debt. And options, real ones, the kind that don't depend on what anyone else thinks. The fake rich lifestyle will always look better than the real one, right up until the moment reality arrives. And reality always arrives. The question is simply which side of that moment you want to be standing on. Stop performing the life. Build it.